Hi, everybody. Thank you for coming and welcome. My name is Shannon Pruitt. I am the Global Chief Content and Partnership Innovation Officer for Stagwell. And I am thrilled to be joined here today as we explore creators and immersive experiences by two friends, actually, which is so lovely. And John and Maggie. I'm going to let them introduce themselves, but for those that are sort of new to our series, we are here, Stagwell is here in partnership with Infinite Reality, which is an immersive technology and experiences company, and Stagwell is the newest global media, data, technology, and creative network on the scene, and built to transform marketing. So we are very excited to be here. We, in the series that we have been doing this past week at South by, we have been really exploring sort of the nature of fandom. And that includes everything from the psychology of a fan, where we released with NRG, which is one of our agencies, the National Research Group, new research about what it means to be a super fan, what is the archetype of that super fan, what is really important in fandom, in immersive experiences, which, spoiler alert, turns out to be innovation, and how important community is, which is a really nice segue into where we are now, as we've gone down the path of trust and authenticity and kind of how those experiences get developed, to having John and Maggie join us because they are both experts in creators, how creators are participating on platforms in new ways and exploring new commercial models, and really have been at the forefront of that for a lot of their careers, actually. So I'm going to let them introduce themselves, and then we'll go into it. Maggie, why don't you go first?
I'm Maggie Malek. I'm the CEO of MMI Agency. We are a modern brand lab where performance meets possibility. And over the past few years, we've had the opportunity to work with over 12,000 gamers and creators. So very excited to talk about that today.
I'm John Ruff. I'm the SVP and Head of Brand Partnerships at UnitedMasters. We're a tech platform and app that helps operate 1.7 million artists' careers and their ambition to be and remain independent as artists.
Which is a really, I mean, again, we've sort of explored different threads of this with different folks who have joined us on this journey. But I think, we're here talking about all of these things, but the truth is like no one just sort of pops into the creator economy or pops into immersive experiences in their career. It's sort of a lot of dot connecting, a lot of along a different, kind of journey and paths and kind of what led you here. And I always think it's just a nice way to start, which is to get to know you both a little bit about your careers, about how you got here. And then we'll explore more around the actual creator space and how that is really coming to bear in what you're doing, but also kind of in the broader ecosystem that we exist in. So John, why don't you go first?
Yeah, definitely. I think I've always been a overly curious person, and so that kind of led me down paths that made me uncomfortable, and so I really leaned into things that I was super bad at. Sports, mainly. So I started my career as a creative intern for the NBA at Phoenix Mercury and Phoenix Suns, and really kind of leaned into how to actually get fans more integrated into the game. And so I was doing everything from building the NBA's first virtual locker room with a genius woman named Amy Martin who kind of pioneered the innovation team on that. And just as an intern, I was so lucky to be a part of that. And so that kind of made me continue to look at how can I help really smart, innovative, creative, talented people's visions come to life and bring fans into that experience. And so that's really what led me down sort of the creative path further. I came out of school in 2008 and really kind of got denied from every creative agency there was in New York. And so kind of eventually found myself back into the creative world after a few different career paths, going one into just TV media, another one going to a tech startup, but came back to the creative side at Vice. And what I found my superpower was bringing creative visions to life through the finding of resources for people. And as we kind of continue that path of going into things that I'm horrible at. Now I work in music. I can't sing, I can't play an instrument, I can't do any of that. But it gives me the utmost respect for those that do and those that have the confidence to put themselves out there and become artists. And so that's what kind of led me to this pathway today. So there's always been that sort of thread of curiosity, but luckily that's kind of given me this sort of generalist nature in a specialist world.
I can assure you that John is very good at what he actually does in his day job. So I work with him on an ongoing basis, and you are very, very good.
It's just
you may not be a good singer,
sports,
or you can't play anything, or maybe won't get into a foot race, but we just know that like you're good at what you do.
Appreciate that.
Maggie.
No, I love that. So if your theme has been curiosity, I guess as I was listening to you, my theme has been service. So I joined the military right after 9/11. My background is kind of wild and weird. After the military, I got my degree in journalism. And if we think about it, journalists are the original content creators. That's where this all started. After that, I actually worked for the Houston Dynamo, so also in sports, and it was their first year. So as an intern, I got to do really cool things as well. I think that's interesting that we share that. And then I kind of bebopped around the technology mom blogger space for a few years, and then I found myself at MMI, where I am now. I originally was on the PR and social team. My founder was amazing. She's this woman named Sydney Marion, and she hired me and said, I don't really understand this digital thing, but if we can do it and brands will buy it, like, let's try it. And so we grew our digital and influencer and creator practice over time. It's now one of the biggest parts of what we do. But I think that background in journalism and that background in service and thinking about brands and MMI as in service to people and consumers is what has kept me so passionate about what creators can do, and that's why this topic is so fun. Because if we think about how creators tap into their fans, that's also a different type of service, and how does that experience become amazing, and how can we use the tools available to us today to extend that. So yeah, it's interesting. We've both kind of taken wild roads to get where we are today, but I think that is what makes us really good at what we do, because you're coming at it from such a different, unique perspective.
We could also start a podcast about sports team internships, because
I also had an internship in sports.
Yeah.
I was running around getting hot dogs for Bill Walton and Greg Gumbel.
So we definitely.
I'm also really good at getting hot dogs. And who needs anything, I'm here available after the podcast.
South by Southwest 2024. That's our podcast.
Yeah, that's going to be
totally
our thing. But I think this notion of fandom bringing people together right in their careers. So, even for me, I worked on American Idol and some of the biggest shows in the world and around World Cup. So this notion of like co-opting fandom and discovering fandom and communicating through fandom. UnitedMasters is a fascinating company to me, as you know. I think it's creating new pathways for creators. I think it's creating inclusivity for creators in a way that didn't exist before. It's changing commerce, ecosystems in music, and obviously all being driven by a group of people we call the creator economy, right? So can you talk a little bit about UnitedMasters, what you guys are doing, and then, I think Maggie, it's funny. So I sort of sat at the intersection of the two of these people and actually trying to broker a deal where Maggie's agency could use UnitedMasters because I think it's such a fascinating business and a fascinating way to support creators, but also, lift them up in their craft in a way that gives them visibility and a better, even more opportunity. So can you talk about UnitedMasters? And then Maggie, I think I don't need to interject. I think you can talk a little bit about how you see that as a world and an opportunity for creators.
Yeah, definitely. So UnitedMasters was founded by Steve Stout, who is a tremendously visionary individual who's been sort of beating the same drum for going on 20 years now. Steve Stout is a former music executive at Sony, at Interscope, and during that time, very, very long story short, he really stumbled upon a fundamental truth that's kind of guided his career since those days, which was that the power of cultural capital drives financial capital. And kind of that aha moment for him is a famous story that he tells about when he was producing the soundtrack for the film Men in Black with Will Smith. The soundtrack performed incredibly well, but he had one thing in his mind. He saw how well the Ray-Ban sunglasses from the music video sold. The Ray-Ban we all know now today can really point back to that moment as being around and as big as they are because of that acquisition, because of that moment. And so he's really seen that he can maybe change the equity of the music industry from outside rather than inside at that time. And so that led him to move into the advertising field. So for years and years and years, he was doing tremendous work with the biggest brands in the world. And the agency is called Translation, and it literally translates culture on behalf of brands and allows them to meaningfully play in that world. And then about 5 years ago, really understood with the sort of assemblance and early signals of the creator economy that it might be time for that conversation to come back into the music industry. And so with that, took this idea of what he's been saying since he left the music industry, which is artists deserve a bigger share of that pie because they're the ones who create the actual thing that we all ingest, right? And so from that point, he had this mind that the creator economy, our role in that is to really support the ownership economy piece of that creator economy. And so UnitedMasters started and founded on that principle, right? And so we are a distribution platform. We distribute music for 1.7 million artists that go through our channels, and we pay them back their royalties from the streaming services. But it needs to go a step further than that. And that's really what we noticed at the sort of maturation of the creator economy, of more people, more DIY creators coming into the space, and more opportunity and more success being found. And so I think where we really have our standpoint and our mission is that we want every creator to have two things, and that's preparedness and optionality. We're not here to tell you what to do with your career. We're not here to say this is the route that's best for everybody. We're here to make sure that when you start to see semblances of success, you start to see streaming success, you start to see success on your social media platforms, whatever that success is, you are prepared to take advantage of that. And then when it comes time to start to make decisions on you not being just an artist, but you being a business, you have the optionality that you can make the best choices for you. You don't have to go and sell your masters away. You don't have to sell your name and your likeness away. You can maintain ownership of your creative craft. And that's really where kind of we've gotten to the point today that now we're starting to see brands meaningfully come and partner with us to play more of an active role in both that optionality and the preparedness that we provide.
I'm proud to say that actually 2 Stagwell clients are 2 of your founding brand partners. So, and they love it, right? They're having a great experience. And so I think that also says a lot, right? You put your money where your mouth is.
Yeah, definitely. Shout out to Diageo and Ally, foundational partners of ours, people that believed in the vision and the products before there was products, right? They just believed in the vision. So yeah, amazing partners to have.
So Maggie, maybe you can talk a little bit about, how you see that as sort of, you have so much experience with creators across so many verticals, right? But this notion, I love, we also own the Harris Poll. And so Maggie's MMI, her company, commissioned some research around the creator and the creator economy. That's really interesting, right? Because 1 in every 4 Gen Alpha want to be a creator when they grow up, right? That's like a big number. Right. So if you can imagine that, it's like 1 in 4 of you sitting in this room are going to want to be creators when you grow up. Like that's a astounding sort of concept to wrap your head around, which means there's going to be platforms that need to support that and organizations that need to support that, and how we think about management and ownership and commerce and all these things. So, but we don't have to go there yet. We will. But Maggie, maybe you can talk a little bit about, sort of your experience with it, kind of what John's talking about, right? In terms of how that's evolved from kind of where you started to where we are today.
Yeah, so I think one of the things that's really kind of different and special about our approach to creators is we are not a technology platform that you're going to call and spin up 4,000 creators tomorrow. We create really bespoke programs, and I love what you were saying about the musicians. For us, the creators are where the magic happens. The creators are taking photos, they're doing videos, they're doing all this really special things. So what we saw was this trend of brands coming to us and just saying, hey, we want a TikTok campaign just to do a TikTok campaign. It started to feel really, really transactional. So we commissioned this study where we actually asked creators, we want proof. It's not just MMI saying how you feel, tell us how you feel. Creators want to work with brands that align to their vision, I'm sure, or to not their vision. Creators want to work with brands who align to their values. So I'm sure that's not super surprising, but I do feel like a lot of brands needed to see that stat before they would believe it. Not every creator is going to work for every single brand. And the other thing, you talked a lot about the platforms and the different channels. We do a lot of education with our creators in terms of how they should negotiate with brands. Like, we are creator advocates. We don't let brands take advantage of our creators. We push them. If somebody is asking for full rights to all your content to use here and in Mars and in perpetuity, they better pay you, baby. Like, that is not free. And so I think doing that study, really understanding the future of the creator economy, what they want, what they need, and how we can make it less transactional has been, really important for us. It's kind of transformed even further the way that we treat and interact with creators. We call our kind of method, we give them freedom within a framework. So what we like is when brands come to us and say, like, what is the business problem that you're trying to solve? And then from there, we can say, okay, maybe we should do this in Fortnite. We should have a TikTok element. Maybe there's a music element, but we really want to wrap it all around and not just think about singular tactics or just an Instagram pastel and peonies post just to do it, but like, what is the problem we're trying to solve? And then who are the right creators with a passion for that problem that we can bring on board to create really amazing content to help us get that done?
So it's so interesting because you basically both hit on some themes that we've been tracking through this series, right? And as we talk about the development and the concepting of immersive experiences and what those need to provide, you have Nova who's talking about what is your service, right? What is that value that you're creating? And then these creators all have communities, right? Big or small. It could be 5 people, it could be 100,000 people, it could be 5 million people. But they all have these communities of people that they have a relationship with, right? That is not a transactional relationship. It's like there's a service, there's a value, there's an emotional connection. And so, in many ways, creators have created their own storylines, right, for who they are and how they show up in the world and all that good stuff. And as you're thinking about now helping them navigate into new platforms, new channels, and how are you preparing them? How are you supporting them? How are you helping them have agency around, how they're showing up? I mean, we're here with Infinite Reality, which is an amazing company. They develop immersive experiences. They have a big deal with Warner Discovery. They've built the ICL track, which is the first thing to come to bear. But they have, they're foraying into other areas where fandom is really important, right? And protecting those fans and nurturing those fans has to be done really genuinely. And so, how are you thinking about? Because this is, all the rage, right? We're seeing music artists show up in the metaverse doing concerts. We're seeing people organize with brands and foraying into product engagement and creation of new products, right? So like Kevin talked yesterday about how Gucci, the flowers, the flora fragrance, going into Roblox, but doing the deal with Miley Cyrus, who wrote a special song, and then they sold backpacks, right? It's a whole ecosystem for what's being developed. And a lot of people don't understand those environments to begin with, let alone how, to be part of them in the right way, in a way that feels authentic to them, but then also how to think about their own commerce, for the future and their communities and all that kind of stuff. So can you talk a little bit, John, maybe we'll start with you.
Yeah, definitely. The publication Music X actually talks a lot about this, and we've been kind of doing a lot of research in this space because when it comes down to music specifically, and I think it bleeds into the creators building their own brands, really it comes down to what's the narrative that you're building that fans will want to engage with and be entertained by. It's a piece of entertainment when it comes down to what music is. And so you go back in the music industry and you were able to tell that narrative over an entire album. And someone would sit down and listen to that entire album. That's a story, whether that was a story about breakups or the story about you coming of age, like whatever the album was about, it was a contained narrative that then manifested itself into your tour, into your merch, into really, really now what is a few outlets. Now what you're talking about is you still have the onus is on the artist to create that same narrative, but you're only dropping singles. You're dropping 30-second songs maybe to maybe get viral on TikTok. Your touring opportunities are a little bit harder. Now they're actually expanding into virtual places that you need to manage. So not only is it a harder ecosystem to manage, but the narrative still needs to be consistent in order to gain more fandom. And I think that's a really interesting part for us to play, and it goes back to that optionality piece, is that when we look to pair our artists with the partners that we work with, because obviously one of our biggest promises is that you come to UnitedMasters and we're going to support you not only through the education and the distribution tools and creator tools, but through brand opportunity. We're going to give you access to syncs, we're going to give you access to performance opportunities, we're going to give you access to platforms that you wouldn't normally have access to. And so navigating that, the biggest thing for us is that we make sure that we do what is in the best interest of the artist. We always talk about pull the right lever at the right time. If there's an artist that is having a specific moment that matches up with what a brand is trying to do or one of our partners is trying to do, making sure that aligns is really, really important. So that's why we measure all of the activity that we do with our partners, not only on the brand impact and the success and ROI they were able to capture from working with an independent artist community, but what was that brand and our work's impact on the artists themselves? How many streams did they increase due to the sync that they got from your commercial spot? How many social followers did they gain because you opened up a stage slot for them at South by? So making sure that the data-backed metrics are there for artist impact, but also showing that we're opening up new touring opportunities. They were able to build their own studio based on the check they got from a custom composition. So it's really, for us, really making sure we are putting the artist in the context of a partnership where they can thrive, as opposed to just saying, hey, here's an opportunity, best of luck to you. So that's really been our position on it in that respect.
And Maggie, you're doing a lot of stuff when, especially like in gaming and things like that, when you take artist creators into Twitch, and you're really fostering those communities. And obviously now, as you move into even more immersive experiences, right, that are, potentially games, potentially we talked about how Infinite Reality got their start doing Burning Man, right, which is an amazing story about really, importance of community and having an experience that's, genuine to who that person is. How are you thinking about that migration? And it's coming in pockets, right, to your point, right? Largely a lot of this stuff we get focused on channels, not people, or not stories, or not communities. And that channel then becomes the rage, as opposed to like forgetting that, like, if you're going to be on the channel, you got to be in context. You got to have the right kind of content. You got to be genuine to who you are and to your community and your fans, or you will have none. So how are you thinking about that?
I think one of the things that I'm seeing that's really cool from the creator space is that creators are understanding that in better ways than even brands are. So if I look at like Ludwig, he's an esports commentator. He's on Twitch. He's streaming games all the time. He knows where his fans are, and he knows that some of his fans are on YouTube, and some are on Discord, and some are on Twitch. And so he's launching this new series. It's 6 episodes. It's kind of based on old school Nickelodeon style like games, where he's brought in 6 other streamers. They're going to do these games, but then there's tons of replay applications. So then he chops up that content and it goes on YouTube. He has an exclusive Discord community where you can interact with him on Twitch through the Discord community, which sounds, again, crazy because it's Twitch Discord crossover. But he's really figured out, like, it's not about the channel. It's not about one spot I need to be. It's about where do I need to create this replay experience everywhere so I am where all my fans are. And that element is something that we've also, similar to UnitedMasters, brought in training for our creators and influencers, where we help them think about, like, you've got a blog. You create amazing photography and videos. How could we use that on other channels? And then we have SEO guys that then teach them how to optimize their channels to show up in search, right? Because people are still also finding this stuff there. So I think empowering creators and gamers to be on different channels and to show up holistically and be creative is what gives them a lot of power. And then brands, that in turn makes them more marketable to brands. If the creator understands their own value and can translate that to a brand, we find that is really, really special.
I mean, the word value, right, is so important, especially as we think about, again, moving into these platforms, right? As we fragment, we also verticalize.
Yes.
Right? We're doing it by belief systems, we're doing it by passions, we're doing it. So like if you strip the channel out of it, you might have a reason for being on a channel. I might go scroll incessantly on Instagram or TikTok. But typically I'm still verticalizing into the areas that I care about. And so platforms like the immersive experiences are really creating this forum for community, right? Which is so fascinating. And One of my favorite things about Maggie is that while she is a CEO, she is also a Pokemon gamer, and she has her own Discord channel. But those are the things like surprise and delight about Maggie that I don't know. But as you're thinking about that too, like create, even in music, right? Like we've had a lot of conversations about creator discovery, right? And so the way that brands often go into discover is like, oh, I know I'm going in by beauty, or I'm going in because of lifestyle, or you like skateboarding, or da-da-da. And we try to put boxes around people a little bit, right? So that we can discover them. But if you take all these inputs and you put them together, you start to see a different picture of who someone really is, right? So in as you're thinking about it on UnitedMasters, how are you thinking about also sort of the evolution of that creator experience in your environment, right, as they look to be in these other environments, right, and how that starts to all kind of come together? Maybe not even now, but maybe, for the future.
Yeah, I think it's difficult in music because music was built on a predatory foundation, and we also have a mentality that artists should be about the art. But when it comes to the burgeoning of these new platforms, there then becomes onus on the artist to do more and more things. And whereas you talk very greatly about support systems that we provide, the hard part is that level of support isn't scalable to a certain nature. It has a stopping point. And so we think a lot about, it kind of goes back to those levers that you pull at the right time. It's really about making sure that they're able to be comfortable in the space as much as possible, but also never ever forget that they are an artist first. And so that's why we are trying to make sure that we fix the foundations of the music industry before adding on other layers of what that is. Because the burgeoning of the creator economy was really good at being creator and artist first. So when we try to bring someone who's an artist over to the creator space, it's a safer space for them to play because there's more rules. A lot of the platforms were designing solutions for them. But when it comes down to it, they're an artist first. And so they're still trying to navigate their main hustle while these obligations of a side hustle are becoming more and more. And so it's a tricky space for sure. And it comes down to not every artist wants to be famous in that respect. Not every artist wants to be the biggest person on social media platforms. You think about Summer Walker, who doesn't want to be out in the world. She just wants to make her music and go about it. And I think some of that's beautiful. And so it's appropriate that we, as players in this world and the brands that we bring into this world, they respect the artists and their paths and don't try to always fit what they want the artist to be and what they do next. It shouldn't always be about the biggest following of what an artist can do. It should be about how do I as a brand support this artist in their creation, because that'll come back to you tenfold rather than always just going after the biggest numbers, the biggest sort of KPI, whatever have you. And so I think that's our perspective on it in terms of it really, really for us is about the music first and then tangentially gets into the more generic creator spaces. And I think it's different because in gaming, there's different predatory natures to the gaming industry, 100%. But the gaming creator space, it was built on community first. And so it's such a natural place to grow and a really interesting place where it was a known behavior to the people that were in that community. Whereas in music, as an independent artist, some people need to learn that as an entirely new craft. And so that's, I think, is just one challenge that artists have to overcome in our space.
Before I was a CEO, I've always been a gamer. Like, I remember playing Star Wars with my dad when I was really little, and like gaming is really important to me. Pokemon, I've played every Pokemon for the past 25 years. I, once upon a time, did not talk about how I was a gamer because I felt like, oh, you couldn't be a girl CEO and be a gamer because people already, don't take me serious with my pink jacket. But I've started talking about it a ton more because I find that there needs to be a lot of education around what gamers look like and what we care about. And so, right at the beginning of the pandemic, the gaming environment really changed a little bit. The game of Pokemon changed, Pokemon Go specifically. So I was a part of a community and it was very toxic and it was very bad. And so some of us left that community, and so we started our own Discord, and it's a safe place. There's 4 of us that are admins. I am the only woman. But there's rules and there's community guidelines, and it's a second job. Like on the weekends, that's my admin shift. Like I make sure that if people are saying bad words or doing crazy stuff, like they get booted from the server. And we have guidelines that say, this is a positive Pokemon corner of the internet. If you want to engage, come over. But if you're a jerk you're going to get booted. And I have found that even sitting down with brands and educating them on, look, like when you work with a creator, they have these other channels. It is so much work. So you are not just paying them to like do a cool thing on their Twitch stream. You are paying them for all of the work that is going into building this fan base, building this community, keeping their community safe. Like a lot of creators really think a lot about that too. And just that part, even if you're just a creator or a musician on TikTok and your comments start going crazy, like a lot of these musicians, artists, gamers, creators, they also have full-time admin staff. So when you are hiring a creator, you're also hiring their admin and a photographer and different people who, again, you want to tap into that community or that fan base of that creator. Let me tell you how much work they do to keep that group safe, and how much work they do to keep it engaged, and how much work they do to protect it. And being able to like whip out my phone and show a brand, this is what this looks like on Discord. I'm not just talking to you about this in theory. Like this is what it looks like. And then I can show them an example of a toxic Discord, the one I was a part of, it's still on my phone. That server, I can show them, okay, like, so when you don't think about the right creator with the right community and the right audience, you tap into these jerks who are going to eviscerate you and that creator really, really fast. And so again, I think that's been a huge education for brands as we think about going into the metaverse, these immersive experiences. Like that is more work on the musician. It is more work on the creator. So if you want to work with them in that capacity, you need to pay them and understand what that looks like. And then you have to make sure that you are finding the people that do align with your values and align with your brand. Otherwise, their communities and their fans are going to rip the creator and you apart. So it's just this multi-layered thing. And I feel really thankful to be a part of that gaming community because it's helped me so much to educate brands and even help other female creators on like, what do you need to be thinking about and where are safe corners for you on the internet?
Sorry, one thing you said I think is really interesting is that brands often want to jump to the shiniest, most creative, craftiest tool when sometimes the answer is incredibly simple. Yes. The amount of foundational support, you mentioned the teams behind people, right? We were having a conversation this morning. The US just raised the cost of visas for artists to travel from the UK to the US by 3x. The fact of the matter is it's only a few $100s or almost $1,000 that it got raised, but you multiply that by teams and you multiply that by production staffs, and it's now becoming impossible for artists to tour because of the rising costs of a visa. And so a brand could have a much more meaningful and impactful role by solving that problem than trying to do a shiny, be the face of my campaign, be on TikTok, be all those things, when you can actually just inherently solve or be the solution in that respect.
Oh, I love that idea. I mean, if you look at what Dove is doing with the Crown Act too, like that's such an interesting point you bring up, is there are so many different government regulations and things going on and ways for brands. Can we get Delta to solve that? Maybe we have them do a campaign.
I have an idea. You could have an immersive experience concert.
Yeah, I mean, so Travis Scott, he's a famous musician. He just did a stream to launch his new album, and he did it in Fortnite. He showed up as a Fortnite avatar, so 30 million people were able to attend that concert. Most traditional venues are like 130,000, right? So 30 million people were able to attend. He made $20 million off merchandise. So not only was it super inclusive, you didn't have to pay to travel, you got to see this, but to your point about what happens next, his song then launched #1 on the Billboard chart. Again, the sales from the merchandise was $20 million alone. Like, it was so cool to see. And again, that idea of like, he can reach his fan who is 14 in some small town and maybe they're in a wheelchair and they can't get to a concert. Well, now they can, and they can interact with other people. And like, that's the magic I want brands to see. Like, that's the magic that creators and musicians and this whole space like gives them something that they can't get on their own.
Well, and speaking about foundational support, that parlays itself into the metaverse as well. If you think about where the metaverse is and Web3 and all these experiences, we are either at ground floor or not built artists first. Like Roblox, for example, did a David Guetta set. Trapital, Dan Runzy's podcast, talked about this a lot. I'll summarize it in a piecemeal fashion. But essentially, for a 20-song set for David Guetta, they had to do over 143 different clearances for those 20 songs. And that was just writers. It had nothing to do with publishing or anything like that. And so the things that you're mentioning are amazing, and it shows that there's different outlets. And as creatives, those creatives can look at these platforms and develop something new for fans to engage with and build something incredibly special and deepen that connection. But that's still where we shouldn't jump always to, let's put on this big, massive thing. With this, we actually have problems that we need to solve for the everyday user, where they can kind of build their fan base from the 1,000 to 10,000 rather than the 10 million to 50 million. And I think it's everywhere you look, no matter if it's immersive and virtual or physical and in person, there's still foundational support that needs to be taken care of.
No, that's so well said.
You're talking about Summer, who isn't really looking to be famous, right? But is there a world where, this is sort of, I'm pushing on what you're saying a little, right? Which is there a world where in an immersive experience, she can have 10 of her friends come, or a small community of people, or her super fans? Because what we do know is, like, for super fans, innovation is one of the drivers of fandom, right? So foundational support, but if she owns, let's say she's on UnitedMasters, she owns her clearances and her masters, she can show up and do an experience inside of a world, right? It might not be Roblox, but she could show up and do an experience in a world that is built, so we had earlier here John V. John V ran music for Roblox. He's now CEO of Napster. Been there for 6 months. They're sort of building the new Web3 enabled sort of version of Napster, right? Which envisions sort of all these same, as you can imagine, right? A similar cadence, a similar dynamic, but includes not just labeled artists, right? Which have been the ones where you're talking about sort of the original environment in which music was sort of, created and arbitrated. But in a world where there's more independent artists and more creators and more sort of ownership, if you will, does that immersive environment, allow you to go in, have, we were also talking about the fact that community can mean, I don't need to go to a concert with 130,000 people. I mean, it's fun sometimes, right? But I can also go to a concert with 5 of my friends, and we could be in a room full of other people, but I don't have 130,000 friends. I mean, maybe I do, but I don't think.
After this week.
Not after this week. I'm running for mayor. Please vote for me. I'm just kidding. But I think that's also something that is, again, the heavy lift for Lil Nas in Roblox was they didn't have a production studio, and then they had to build one, and so it's not it's not so easy even for any kind of innovative technology that is inviting in kind of new experiences, kind of being uncomfortable, if you will, like you said. But is there a world for independent artists and creators where they can develop a closer relationship with their communities? It's all about self-expression, right? Creative self-expression, so important in the metaverse, as we know, creating value. How would you think about that, right? As you're thinking about the artists and creators that you're working with.
I mean, I think the interesting thing about that, because we work with a lot of more, mid-tier creators in terms of follower size. So they're never going to host a concert probably in Fortnite. But the interesting thing I see them doing is we work with a lot of chefs, because we have a lot of health and wellness brands, is you think of Twitch as streaming for gamers, but a lot of chefs are now using Twitch to stream content again, and they're putting it out there in different spaces. And so then what you see is you've got this rising of small chefs and home chef content creators, and they're using these different gaming platforms to film and get out there, and then they're using again a Discord or something to create that community. And I find your question's really interesting, because it is a place for smaller people who don't have as big a platform to start building that and growing it. And what's funny is when you interview or talk to a lot of these chefs or home cooks, they're yeah, I just thought I was gonna put some stuff on Twitch and maybe my friends would watch, and the next thing I knew, I turned around and hundreds of thousands of people were tuning in to see my videos about how I make empanadas. And so I think that's a really, it's made it more accessible for non-celebrities to gain notoriety and get fandom in a way that even I think 3 years ago, pre-pandemic, was more difficult.
Yeah, I think the theory of kind of what you're getting at is the theory of 1,000 fans, right? been around for years and years and years, and you have debunkers, you have advocates, you have everything in between. I think when it comes down to it, when you want to step into a role as an artist or creator, you should realize that there are different paths to that. It's not a one size fits all. And in that respect, as you develop a business, you should understand the options that that business provides. Like, we have artists that want nothing to do with performance opportunities, want nothing to do with being in a brand campaign. They crush the sync game. They make songs that brands like the NBA and ESPN use on their social channels and their broadcasts, and they continue to reinvest that money they make for syncs into creating more syncable tracks. And so the demystification of the business is what I think holds people back from really harnessing that 1,000 fan theory, because most people think the 1,000 fan theory is, I can monetize these 1,000 people, but in your brain, as any business owner will tell you, you always want to scale that. And many people have come out and said the more you scale, the more you have to dumb down your product. And I think that doesn't always have to be true, but I think in music, it gets to a certain spot where you can't create music for everybody. And so I think there's the diversification of what you know about the business that you're in, even if you don't know you're in it when you start it, is what helps creators diversify and maintain those 1,000 fans by showing up in different ways. Whether that's really leaning into Metaverse solutions, whether that's becoming an expert at commercial syncs, or being that famous face that actually looks to build their brand and make appearances and things like that. I think it's really about understanding what is the best business decisions for you as an artist that actually helps you create a closer relationship with those 1,000 and 10,000 and 50,000 fans.
And they are businesses, right? Yes. Like, creators are businesses and that's how they see themselves, which is an interesting point, right? Because we're talking about essentially like executions and things like that. Like, as you're working with them, because I think this is a long-term, there's a Charlie Fink who is a professor, and he talks about the metaverse and immersive experiences a lot. He says that we often overestimate the short term and underestimate the long term, because we get super excited and then we dive in and we rename our companies Meta. And then, suddenly the whole world thinks that we have to put on VR goggles in order to explore the metaverse, which is not true, because the metaverse is screen agnostic, right? So, if you're thinking about that and you're thinking about the long game, right, for these creators, because, Rome wasn't built in a day. You don't develop a reputation, hopefully most people in the best way, if you want a really good reputation, don't develop that overnight. But like, how are you sort of helping educate them and to create that foundation, right? Not just for a tactical execution or a transaction-based moment, or maybe you hit fire on TikTok, but then the next day you're not going to see anything for like months and months and months, right? Someone who gets 100,000 followers overnight freaks out, and then like they don't realize what comes with that, as well as like you got to keep going, and not everything's going to be 100,000 followers overnight. So like, how do you think about that for them and helping them understand like how to be a business in and of themselves? They are their own personal brand, but that comes with a lot of responsibility and a lot of opportunity.
I feel like this is also just like really good life advice. When you first start working at a company, everyone thinks they want to be in management one day, and then you're like, oh my God, do you know what that means? That means HR. No, I think that helping them understand they're a small business is really important. And we have brands still that will come to us and say, hey, can we get 5 creators to do this for free if we give them affiliate codes? No, and we don't often even give that opportunity to our creators unless it's something that like we think is really, really cool. But again, it goes back to like educating them on, you are a creative. Your content and the work you do has real value. And so you shouldn't undervalue yourself. Again, like one of the things that we do, again, that's kind of different, if we reach out to a creator and they tell us their rate for something, our team will come back and say, your rate is actually not high enough. We're not taking that back to the brand. This is what comparative for your follower size, for the type of content, this is what other creators are asking for. So perhaps like you should think about your own rates in that same way. And again, it's why creators really love working with my team, there's 20 of them, is because they are really fiercely advocates for that space, I think one of the things that, I don't want to see is the creator space broken in the same way some of advertising has been, right? Like people they forget again that like musicians, that people have a distinct personality and these are real human beings with hearts and minds and communities. And so part of like why we're so bullish about protecting creators and making sure that they protect themselves is we don't want to see surveys that say, oh no one even believes creators anymore, because that is a very important part of PR and authenticity and like world building for brands. So again, that education and helping them understand their own worth it's just so very important. And I don't think there is enough time being spent on that, especially when a small nano or micro influencer comes in. They're in hustle mode, right? They want to take every deal that comes their way. Sure, I'll do this thing for this brand. Sure, I'll do this thing for this brand. Well, what we've seen over time is those creators then plateau at around 50 or 60,000 followers. They don't grow because when people are going to their platforms, people are seeing all your content is sponsored content. Where is your soul? What is your real opinion about things? And so if you get into it you want to grow up or you want to blow up and have 5 million followers, it's never going to happen. Like you have to keep core to you, who you are, what you started this for, and then think about it cross-platform, think about it in multi-places. But again, even the smaller creators, making sure they understand like what's coming next. I mean, you mentioned like a lot of them do, like they might have one thing blow up and they don't anticipate. And so they'll call our team and like we'll help them sometimes even manage when their TikTok comments are blowing up and they didn't expect it. Again, because that also, brands expect that now too, that you're not going to let your comment section get out of control. So it's just a really fascinating thing. And I think it's also important to remind our creators that like not everyone is going to be a musician with 5 million bajillion followers. Not everyone's going to be Kim Kardashian. And oh, by the way, not everyone wants to be. So maybe your sweet spot is being a mid-tier, and that's awesome. And then how do we monetize the crap out of that and get you everywhere? So that's what we think about a lot.
What's interesting about music's role in Web3 and Metaverse technology is that the creator economy and the general sense of creator now with social platforms is all relatively new. The career pathing for artists and musicians has been around for quite a while. As predatory as it may be, people still understand the mechanics that allow you to grow as a musician and gain fans. Haven't changed tremendously in their thematics. Obviously, the mechanics have changed. But when you mentioned our partners at Diageo, we were very fortunate to partner with them on their brand Bullet Bourbon, and they announced a commitment to pay for and make available 100 hours of mentorship towards UnitedMasters artists. And what we wanted to do is we wanted to make sure we didn't just bring a bunch of artists into a room, have somebody talk to them about the music industry, and that was your mentorship and we're done. So we took a research-based approach, and we actually took our insights panel of however many thousand artists it's up to these days and asked them what they wanted. And then we looked internally at our A&R teams, our talent teams, our music teams. We asked them what the artists that they work with every day ask for. And it really comes down to, I've said like 9 times on this podcast, but like foundational help. They want marketing and promotion. They don't much care what channel that marketing promotion help lands on. They just want marketing and promotion help. They want ability to perform. They don't care if it's virtual. They don't care if it's in real life. They want the ability to perform their art form. They want help with their A&R. They want help understanding sync. They want help building their business. And so it's one of those things where you have creators in the more recent sense, they are driven and born out of the continuation and establishment of platforms where musicians are seeing these platforms, some that come and go, and some they found success on, some people had to abandon audiences on. And so looking at this as, yes, another opportunity to take advantage of and use towards my art form, but it really does come down to those foundational things on how do I grow my art form on those channels, not how do I grow the channel. And so I think it's a little bit of a different relationship just because of the legacy of the music business.
That's so well said. And I do feel like this next evolution of Web3, like what we're seeing with creators even is, unfortunately, a lot of these platforms are walled gardens, right? Instagram, WordPress even, Facebook, YouTube. they've attracted a ton of creators, right, that are putting content out there. But what I'm so pumped about with the metaverse, with Web3, with this next phase is Instagram can make a change overnight that hurts creators significantly in terms of monetization and showing brands value. In the metaverse, in Web3, a lot of the idea is around you can own your own spot. So you're making your own spot. It is unique, it is yours. No one in Silicon Valley can make a change that hurts your numbers overnight. And so a lot of creators are very excited about what Web3 can look like, what the metaverse can look like, because of that idea around all of these traditional platforms have sprung up, they have shut down, they have taken advantage. And so I think that's part of where this next world opening is going to be transformational for musicians, for creators, in terms of having unique aspects of owning their content in ways that no one else can take it away from them.
And I think cultural creative work has always been fascinating, right? There's a brilliant piece that Decode put out a few months back that talks about creative thought. Some of the best things that radiate through creative in our worlds are built out of the lack of resources. It is the lack of resources and the coming together of hybrid communities to intersect and start to work together. And I think what's interesting about the Web3 piece of that is because it's a vastness of an open plane, you almost have a lack of resources because of the sheer possibilities. And I think there's an interesting place where that can actually start to come back towards creating cultural, creative work that resonates in a place that is seemingly cultural expansion land. You know what I'm saying? And so I think there's a really beautiful thing that can come out of it as a place that is owned by creator first thinking.
One last question for each of you, which is, kind of feel free to take it however you want, actually. What are you most excited about? Like, what gets you kind of fired up for, we're all kind of doing what we need to do now, and we're building what we need to build now. But in terms of kind of what's next, or what are you excited about? It doesn't even have to be next. It could be what's happening right now that you're excited about. What are you excited about as you think about like the creator economy and sort of the opportunity that sits, here now, but also I think as we mature even more, what are you jazzed about?
A guy that used to work with at Vice used to say he thinks the world's going to be run by generalists. And I think that inherently fits my own life really well in terms of how I've gotten to where I am and what I do today. But I think when you look at history, right, I think everyone understands that this is the 50th anniversary of hip hop, and everyone's talking about that. It's the 100th anniversary of Disney. And obviously you've seen the campaigns and everyone's celebrating it and all the things that are happening. But I think what's going a level deeper to what that means, it means that 50 years ago, this thing was created. It was a very singular, specialized entity. Same year that Warner Brothers was created. And those two things did one thing really, really well. Fast forward 100 years, they are diversified channels doing a million different things, doing most of them incredibly well, and have become something more generalist. You look at hip hop 50 years ago was one thing. And that thing has morphed into something so tremendously beautiful that can affect people around the world, and has now moved into worlds where various people that wouldn't have been doing hip hop 50 years ago are expanding their mindsets and expanding into those genres. And I think if you're just going 50-year clips, I'm excited for what is starting today and going to be true in 50 years, because I think this is the time in our lives where we're approaching things, and at least I can speak for what we do, approaching it in the right way. And when you give people, and it's mentioned at the top of kind of how I've built my careers, like if you give creative people resources, you will undoubtedly find something beautiful at the end of that. And so I think that's to me what I'm excited about. Is if I'm lucky enough to be around in 50 years, I'm excited to see what that 50th anniversary holds.
I think Web 2, there was a lot of really cool things, but also I feel like we got a lot of things like wrong in terms of safety and protecting user information and all of that. I think Web 3, the metaverse, the possibilities are endless, and it's also so inclusive if we can get it right. And that's what I'm really excited about. I'm really excited about like and I'll use Pokemon Go as an example again, right? There's AR, that's a really important part of the game. But what happened during the pandemic is Pokemon Go prior to the pandemic was a game you had to play walking around. During the pandemic, people that were isolated in their homes started playing Pokemon Go. They changed the game. So people in wheelchairs or who were bedridden, who are socially awkward and don't like going out could now play the game. And that was part of the reason I started this community, right? And so I think making the world more accessible to people is really, really, it's magical and it's important because we're all so different and we're all so special. And this next phase, whether it's 50 years or 100, I just think it's going to continue to get more open, and it's going to continue to open opportunities for people that they never would have had before. And I think I know that is something that is so special and important, and it's needed right now, I think more than ever. So that's what I'm excited about, just the endless possibilities of what we can do in these immersive spaces.
And I think I completely agree with both of you. I think it's all so exciting. And we have, new generations of storytellers, multiple ways to tell their stories and bring them to life that represent all different kinds of backgrounds and abilities and communities, and, to participate and engage and connect around those in all these different, spaces and places. Is really exciting, and I want to thank you both for being here with me. I appreciate
you for having us.
We love you.
And I want to thank Infinite Reality again for partnering with us and the Stagwell team for helping bring this to life. And it's been a beautiful South by. Wish you all a beautiful South by, and thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.